What's going on, friends? Alright, let's do some lighting here. So this is going to be a short tutorial, hopefully short, on how to wire up a 3D printed object like this with some LED lights. And I'm also going to cover briefly, not going to go into depth, just kind of like a high-level soldering tutorial. So let's look what we got here. This is a multicolor print that came off of a bamboo. And this is going to be our face. Here is the back piece. There's a little hole there for a cord. I might actually drill this out and put a switch in there. And this kind of just fits together like so. And we glue it. So, LEDs. We have many options when it comes to LEDs. You could use addressable LEDs, which is what these are. You'll notice there's a 5 volt, a ground, and a data pin. These require a controller. This is a special controller for addressable LEDs. So if you've ever seen lights that can produce rainbows and all sorts of animations, that's an addressable LED strip. For this, it might look okay, but we've already got colors in here, so I have found when you use colored LEDs that change colors with a colored print, it kind of, I don't know, it can detract from it, and certain colors get oversaturated and it looks really kind of dirty and muddy. So what we're going to do is we're going to use, I've got some leftover just 5 volt cool white LEDs. I'm probably going to use these. If you want more light, these are the best. They're also very bright, so sometimes they can almost produce too much light. This is called a COB or a COB. I don't know. Somebody's probably going to correct me on that. I don't know if it's like an acronym. Let me get a razor so I can cut this off. Okay. You can see these. It's like one big giant. Those LEDs are packed in there very close, compared to this. You can see the individual SMDs right there. So if you got one of these, great. These are really good. A little more expensive, obviously, because they're more condensely packed. And this particular one also has an inline controller on it, and it came with a remote. That's another thing that you could do here. Like I mentioned before, I'm just going to use a switch, but you could use a remote, and you could control it that way. I'll provide some links in the description for various knickknacks that you could use for your LED project. Okay, so let's get started here. You're going to need a soldering iron, obviously. Let's see if I can get mine into view here. This is what I have. I got this on Amazon. Works really well. It's got a spool holder on it. You can see there's a temperature gauge. You can dial it up and down. It's got some helping hands, which sometimes I use, and it has a cleaning pad. I tend to avoid sponges. I'm sure there's people in the camp that love sponges. I find these to be a lot better at keeping the tip clean and not allowing it to get, you can get buildup, and if you get buildup on your tip, the solder will not stick to it, and it's really frustrating. So these wire cleaners are great for keeping the tip nice and clean. And another trick is when you put your soldering iron away and you're done with it, leave a little bit of solder on it. I learned that from some other astute electrical individual, and boy, it made a difference. Okay. So let's get into it. I also have a stand for mine, which is going to give me an opportunity to share another cool device. Where did I put it? This guy. You don't have one of these? This is a game changer. I don't know what I was doing before I had one of these, because this just makes trimming your prints so much easier. If you've printed them with a brim, which this one had on it, you just grab this guy and you just go like that. Right along the edge. I'm gouging this one, but it's okay. That's going to be on the bottom anyways. You just carefully run it along the edge here and it will trim off. There you go. Nice and smooth. Okay, so this is what mine's going to end up looking like. It's going to be something like that, so it can stand upright. Okay, let's get into the soldering. Enough of that. Alright, let me make sure I've got enough LEDs here. I didn't even try that. This is going to be plenty. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to run these around the edge. This is how you can get the best diffusion when you don't want to have hot spots. LEDs will produce hotspots very easily in a lot of these 3D prints. So going around the edge is a safe bet for diffusing LEDs. However, if you want to have your LEDs directly facing it, here's what I recommend. This stuff is amazing for diffusion. This is just packing material. I keep it when I get packages because I use this for diffusion, and boy, it's amazing what it will do, especially with colored LEDs. If you're having like an animation run, you will almost always see hot spots of each of the individual LEDs lighting up, and this completely smooths it out. It's pretty rad. All right, let's do this, huh? So the first step I'm gonna do is I'm basically just gonna wrap the LEDs around the inside of this thing. And keep in mind, we have a back. Looks like we got about like a 2mm inset. So we don't want to run it all the way up to the edge here. We want to give a little bit of space. Also, these things are notorious for coming off. I'm going to use some isopropyl alcohol to just spray some of this, give it a little wipe. And sometimes I even go so far as to use a hot glue gun to tack down corners, which we might do here. And you know what, I should probably have a towel under this so I don't... My cutting mat here, as you can tell, has seen better days. Okay. Is there still adhesive on that? Yeah, there is. All right, so here's what we're gonna do. We're just gonna run this thing around the inside. All right, there we have it. Got the LEDs run around the inside. Just make sure this fits on, it's not like pushing on them. Yep, good. All right. Oh yeah, I forgot. We need wire. Let me get some wire. It depends on how you're wiring yours up for power. Some of these LED strips come with, you know, like a USB. Let me see if this one does. Okay, so it depends on what we're going to do for power. You could just use one of these, and bingo, a bag of USB cables. This is what I like to use. You just get these on Amazon, and it's just your standard USB. It's got a micro on the other end. We're just going to chop that off. So then you can plug it into any 5-volt, you know, doesn't matter what it is. Just as long as it's a 5-volt little battery block, you can do that. Another option would be to actually use a dedicated power supply. So I keep these. Like if I have an old hard drive or an old electrical device or whatever that has a power supply, I don't ever throw them out. I always keep these because these are perfect for LED projects like this. This particular one is a 12-volt, which wouldn't work. We'd blow our LEDs up, but I could have run 12-volt LEDs here and just used this power supply. So there's a couple different options. So like I said, I keep these and I have a box of them over here and they work great. But in this case, let's use this USB strip. And again, I'll put the links in the description. So let's do some trimming here. If you don't have any, you 3D printers out there, I'm sure you got plenty of these. Snips. We're just going to snip this off. And then I'm going to use some wire strippers. If you don't have wire strippers, you can get away with this. You just have to be really careful. You kind of have to like pinch, 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 and then try and yank it off. I've got this here. So we're going to go like that. All right. So this particular USB cable is going to have a data, a ground, a positive, and I guess a common they probably put in here. And I'm pretty sure red is positive and black is negative, and we can test that. Another device you might want to invest in at some point as you start messing with electronics is a multimeter. Let's get this out of the way. And we are going to test this. We're going to change our multimeter to DC. I just plugged this guy in. Let me unplug it again because I need to strip off a little bit more. Let's see, we're going to strip, yeah, red and black, I believe, is what we want here. Because I've done this before and I remember, my memory serves me correct. Okay, let's plug this in. I'm going to put that probe on that one and that one on that one, and there we go, 5.25. I don't know if you can see that. Bingo. Now if I was to switch these, there we go, negative. So we know red is in fact positive and black are negative, and I'm going to trim off these other two. Okay, so we got our cord, a power cord at least. And I mentioned before I was going to run a power switch. So I am going to jump forward. Okay, threw a switch in here. Nice. Okay, we're through, success. All right, this is probably a good point to show you how to wire up a switch if you've never wired up a switch before. Again, this step is optional. You could just plug her right in. I mean, solder it right in to the LEDs. All right, so we need to like do this in a way that we don't have a bunch of excess wire in here, because these lights will create a reflection on our backside. So I am going to now solder one of the positive leads to here, and then the other positive goes to the LEDs, because this is an interrupt on-off switch. So let's do a little soldering here. Okay, so the first thing about soldering is my tip here. I'm going to throw a little solder on it, and this actually helps kind of clean it. I'm going to let it sit there and bubble for a minute, and then I'm going to stick it in my wire cleaner and twist it around, and you'll see now it's nice and shiny. That's what we want. And here we go. I'll try and get this a little closer. We're going to do what's called tinning, and you want to get just a little bit of solder on each of these wires. Okay, like that. And I'm also going to pre-tin our switch bracket, or leads here. I'm going to try and get some solder on them as well, without melting the heck out of this thing. All right, there we go. So, positive. I'm going to need a little bit more wire here, because the negative needs to be longer than the positive. So yeah, let's strip a little bit more off of here. Let's go like this. Yeah. Like that. I need to trim our other wires that we are not going to use. Bingo. And let's pull this back down a little bit. All right, so we're going to go red. It's going to go directly to our switch. I'm just holding the soldering iron kind of on the wire, and because the wire had solder on it and the anchor had solder on it, they both heat up together. And I kind of use the side of the soldering iron because it's hotter. Well, sorry, it's not hotter, but it has a larger surface area, so it can make it happen a bit quicker. And we got to be careful too, because if you overheat stuff like this, where it's going into plastic, it can cause some problems. All right, so I just need like one little piece of wire here. Just dug through the trash, found a spare wire from a project I was working on earlier. So let's do this again. We're going to put a little solder on here and on here. Let's heat this up. There we go. Okay. All right. Kind of want these to be as short as possible so that we don't create any shadows. So I'm going to shorten this red one to about the same length as the black one. And now I'm going to use another tool. Now this is generally what I use for wire stripping. These are awesome. It grabs it and pulls the sleeving right off. Check it out. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this. There we go. A lot more efficient than this, but these are good for yanking off sleeving on something like, you know, USB cable like that. Okay, so let's pre-tin. There we go. All right, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna solder positive to the positive, and I need to do this in a way that I'm gonna kind of like cock it like that. Let's see if I can get this in there. This is kind of tough because we made, or I made, I should say, trying to make this as close as possible to the lid and the bottom. Okay, I think we got it on there. Let's give it a test. I'm gonna plug it in. Hey, look at that, there we go. Very diffused, it looks great. Here, I'll turn it off. On, off, on. I've got a lot of lights in here. In a dark room, this is gonna look really good. It shouldn't show through the black. The black is pretty thin on the front on this model, and it was designed in a way you can see so that the black was thicker on purpose so that the light would not transmit through it. But I'd say that looks pretty darn good. All right, last step. I am going to, just to be safe, I'm gonna use some hot glue to tack down some of these corners. All I did was tack in a little hot glue, you can see here, on the corners, like here, and there. One thing I forgot to mention, if you are using a controller, and let's say that you weren't using a switch or anything, it might look like this. This is for an addressable LED. For standard LEDs, it just has positive and negative lead. What I have done in the past is just try to kind of like find an area to mount it out of the way with hot glue. And this side, oh yeah, that thing got crushed, didn't it? It's all right, I never use that anyways. This side, what we would do is we'd snip it off. Our positive and negative would come into this. Positive and negative comes out of that end and goes into the LEDs. So it would be basically this type of thing. Comes in, goes out, goes to the LEDs. All right, last but not least, I'm just gonna super glue this thing together. So I'm gonna get some super glue and some accelerator. And I'm gonna blow out any dust that's in this thing. And get my super glue. We're just gonna run a bead around the edge. You gotta be a little careful with black because super glue can react. Sometimes you might have noticed if you ever use super glue, it can create like a white coloration. So I try to keep it towards the inside edge just in case. And then what I'm going to do, this is super glue accelerator, I'm going to dab some of this on the back lid, and what this does is it helps it bond real quick. I'm going to fold this over, give it a press. And that's on there and it's not coming off. Excelente. All right, let's get this out of the way. Last but not least, got our stand. Well, I have a stand. You don't have to use a stand. And so I'm just gonna do the same thing. I'm just gonna dab some super glue on, get that kind of in the center of our mount there. And let's do this again. Put some super glue on here. I'm trying to stay in the middle because in my case, oh wait, no, I'm backwards, doesn't matter. The mount is wider than the logo on purpose. So this is kind of like, if I don't get it as centered as possible, it's kind of it. So let's let it rip here, and hopefully I can get it as in the middle I possibly can. Just gonna put some pressure on it. There we go. Oh man, there's all my gouging. I was hoping that was going to end up on the back side. I can probably clean that up a little bit. There we have it. That's it.